Thanks, and thank you. At least I already know you got my bag even before you can start. Thank you, Camila. Amazing. I love that. All right, cool. We're not gonna really waste a lot of time, especially that we have a lot of content to cover. So I think it's wise for us to be able to start directly already. So welcome to the Market Research Masterclass. I hope that you have been taking the previous episodes. Today we're having the fifth episode, which is like how to conduct market research with me. In case you didn't see a post or you don't know me, my name is Victor. I'm the regional manager of entity development in MEA. I was in charge of GTA and marketing last year in the same regional office. And then I was MCVP OGT Algeria. I was born and raised in Lesotho. So anyone who's interested in coming to Lesotho, I'm free to host you. So make sure you come. I love basketball and chess, just like one of the regional managers hate them. We kind of like the similar stuff. And then in case you wanna talk about basketball chairs, you can find me on IG at Victor H. So yeah, that's basically it. And before we can start, I need to make you aware, like in case you have any question, please raise your hand and then I can be able to give you space since we're not even a lot. So I would like us to communicate, like share ideas. And also the people that are here, if you don't mind, I would like to know from which department you are from. You can just rename it. Like if you're from marketing, you're from OD, just for me to see my environment. So I can be more centralized to other side, even though still covering the whole content. But before we can start anything, I just want us to have a quick recap, right? I feel like the whole reason why we have this master class is for us to understand like how do we know that people want to buy our products or our services? This is regardless of like whether you're like MCVP, MXP, how do you know that people want to buy your product? Or like whether you're like an OD person and then you want to make a research and try to understand like can we open an expansion here, or like you're an EUR, you want to create an event, like how do you know that people will come to the event? So if you know this book, which is like The Art of War by Sun Tzu, he said it the best. You know what he said? He said, a battle is won before it was ever thought. So you need to understand like for you to be able to like have or be sure people to buy your product, you gotta prepare. You gotta prepare before. You don't just go to the mic and go like, hey, here's my product, and you think people are gonna buy it, or like, hey, this is the experience that we're providing in ISEC before you can prepare for it. So yeah. And then I don't know also if you know this guy. He's a very interesting guy. He's an entrepreneur. He's the Chinese Canadian, I think so. So I was listening to one of his videos. So one of the things that he was talking about in his video is like he has a mentor, right? So his mentor used to tell him something like, let's say you have an idea, right? And then you write it down, you kind of like prepare a sales pitch, something that you think you can sell to people. And then you go to a place, a public place where you can find a lot of people, and then you take it there. And then you give this paper to them to read this idea that you have crafted, right, for sales, right? And if you give it to people and they say to you something like, hey, that's nice, that's really pretty cool. That's nice. I kind of like it. It's beautiful. Or like if they say you gotta know like that idea, it's horrible. Like that means that they're just trying to be nice, no matter how much you might have tried to say, hey, I have this idea, blah blah blah. If they say it's pretty cool, that's a nice idea or something like that, just know like they're just trying to be nice to you and then try to be polite. But if they say, for example, oh, where can I buy this? Like, how can I get some of this? Like after you show them that, then you should be aware that you got something going on there with the product. So you need to understand there's a difference between like people being nice to you and people actually be willing to buy it. Because one of the things that he mentions is like people always vote with their wallets, not with their mouths. So people can say anything, but unless they're actually willing to pay or like to invest, whether it's like their time, making an example for someone who's like MXP, like they're willing to spend their time, like they can tell you as many nice things as they get. But if they're not willing to put any effort, like any resource on it, then you should know like, nah, it's not a good idea. So it's the same thing that applies even in ISEC, right? If you're trying to sell a product and then people say to you like, oh, that's a nice thing. For example, you're used to selling maybe GV and then now you want to introduce GTE. They go like, okay, that's really cool. You guys also have like teaching opportunity. You already know what they said about it, right? Or like, let's say you're trying to recruit people and then you're trying to tell people about what you do in the organization, and they go like, oh, you guys, you do really cool stuff in your organization. I like it. Like those are not the answers you should be expecting. Or let's talk about for Giant right now. Giant is trying to sell, like, for example, an idea to a company so that they can sponsor that EWA event. And then the guy goes like, wow, I really, really like the fact that you guys will care about you. If you're trying to make an impact, I wish you the best, like something like that. No matter how good stuff they can say, but as long as they don't say something that shows the willingness, then you're gonna know it's a no idea. So direction, at least the reaction that you should get from people is like, how do I go this program? For example, like, how do I join the organization if you're trying to sell them or you're trying to recruit them? Or like, when is the event? How can I be part of it? Like, these are type of the reactions that you should be expecting. Then I'll tell you like, hey, we are talking. So yeah, so far, everything that we have been talking about is just trying to answer like all this question about like market research. So you have had like a couple of like sessions before, like for example, why, how, what, which was delivered by our amazing aunt. And then you also had like asking the right questions, which was delivered by Hytham. So it means that there's been like a flow or a connection. You can understand why and how and what. And then you also can understand how do you ask the right questions, right? And then you also have like data analysis. How can you analyze data? And then you're also having insights usage. And then lastly, which was like yesterday, you had to understand like how to conduct market research on MC level. What do you want to make a research? You want to, for example, even in the beginning of your term, you had to make like a research before, right? And then today, what you're going to be doing is like how to do market research with our LC. So the main objective that you're going to try to achieve is like, okay, how can we reach more people, like, which are not in our common market, right? And then the second thing is like the timelines that you should take into consideration, and then maybe like for you to execute like initiatives that you have, the synergies, especially with the LCs, because you're not going to be working alone, right? So these are the things, but the primary thing is like the creation of working tools. You got to be having working tools or like knowledge of the LCs, how are you supposed to manage them in the phase timeline. So that's basically it. So I want to also remember, how many of you remember this? If you don't remember it, I'll tell you why. How many of you remember this? Jayan, do you remember this? Camila? Aziza? Oh my God, Aziza here. Does any of you remember this? No? Okay, cool. So what I'm gonna say to you is like, you gotta go from the beginning of like this masterclass. So this was like the first episode that was provided there. So my expectations was like, we have been following like probably like the whole masterclass so that it can kind of like click together. But yeah, this is what we're going to be using today to actually create our markets research. So the first thing that you should be aware of, as it is mentioned there, is problem defining, and then research objective, research design, sampling, data collection, data preparation, analysis and interpretation, report preparation, presentation, and description of opportunities after you have made the report, after you have done the market research. So this is what we're going to try to do. So the first part of it, like I already said, is like problem defining and research objective. So regardless of like which department you're from, I'm very curious, what do you think would be like your hypothesis, or like what is the problem that you think you want to solve with your market research, because you're here for a reason. I want someone to share with me like why, like what do you think is the problem you want to solve? Anyone? We're not a lot of people, so I'm kind of like expecting us to share. So like what I'm trying to say is like, you are here because you want to understand how to do market research, and definitely it's because maybe you want to apply. So I want to know in your department, why do you want, or like what is the problem that you think you're trying to solve? Don't be shy. I'm actually a very shy person, but I'm trying to tag along. I promise you. Giant, you already got my back from the beginning. So right now, what do you think you would do for EWA? Like, why would you need market research for your EWA in Slovakia?
Basically, it would be done to know how much our projects are impacting the youth of Slovakia, or youth of our entity, something like this.
Exactly. I love that, because that's actually one of the reasons why we should do it. Camila, you're the second person who had my back previously. How about you in BD?
Hi. it's been really complicated to do market research. Like I've been facing these problems. Like everyone is telling me, yeah, you're so cool, guys. We like it. We will contact you, but they don't. And you're like, what did I do wrong? What was I lack for? Maybe information, maybe some proposals.
Amazing, cool stuff. I think we have the last person that is like Marsha. Marsha, do you want to share if you're here? Also, why would you need market research? But if not, you can share next time. So, for example, every single department can have their own like problem that they want to solve or like their hypothesis. For example, someone in OGX can say, hey, we want to introduce a new product, right? Like OGTA. ICX say, hey, I want to find partners that are willing to work with like 70-30 model. Or like EY, hey, when I try to run a new initiative. BD, like how the hell do I get to sell like ISEC to this company? Is because like, for example, we are new to the market. We have never sold it before. MXP, hey, I want to do recruitment, but like, how are we going to make sure we recruit the right people? Marketing guy can say, you know what, like we have been having a lot of signups, but like from sign up to apply, like the conversion rate is like low. So we got to figure out like, yo, what are we supposed to be doing? So yeah, which is why like, for example, when you are like trying to design like your research objective, there are like some questions that you're supposed to be answering, especially if you want to do it with like LCs. Okay, I was trying to read the private messages. So I was saying like, for example, like some questions that you might need to answer while you are creating like research objectives. Is the first one is like, when should it be done? Like, for example, each of you already have a reason why you do like the market research, right? But you should be able to understand like when should it be done, like specific dates. Maybe if in like for someone like you, I want to have you speak for them like in December. You cannot have like market research like 1 month before. You gotta make sure like you do it before. Whether you're like in BD, maybe you're selling your BD for you to have opportunities with the companies. They can bring like EPs there. So you gotta understand the timeline. And then also one of the things is like, since here we're going to talk about working with the LCs, you need to understand like, does this affect all my LCs, like the whole network, or it actually affects like the specific ones, right? And then also like, can I run the research with specific LCs or not? Because sometimes you can find that another people are like, other LCs are not affected by that. Or you can find that like another LC, they've already been running the product, or like they don't have the market that you're trying to sell. Like not everyone else maybe can have a market for you as an example. And you also need to ask yourself, like, should this research be run like at the national level? As in like, I coordinate with the LCs, like, but everything is done is centralized. Or me as an MCVP, can I, or do I have enough resources for my LCs, or do they have enough resources for them to be able to run this research on their own while I'm just literally monitoring them? Like maybe you have LCs that have around like 200 people, which means that they can do maybe the market research for themselves. Or you can have like small LCs that are like maybe 30 people that might need you guys to, or even your entity might not be very, very big for like in terms of like the resources. So at the end of the day, when you conclude your research objective, the phase, you should, like I already said, you should be able to have like your objective. You should be able to understand how will you run it. Will you run it per LC? Will you run it like as a national? And then the LC involvement. Are you going to involve all the LCs into this market research, or you're going to select few of them? And then the time frame, when are you going to be done with this? So I created, so for example, like this small tool that you can see in case you just want to make a small analysis. So yeah, the first part of it is here, like you just need to sort of like understand the problem that you're doing. So I try to put like a lot of like different problems that people can face. And then you also need to understand like, when should it be done? Do you have specific dates? Does this affect all the LCs? No. Or yes, maybe. If yes, are you willing to work with all the LCs, or you want to do something like piloting? Maybe you can say, okay, cool. We do have the market for GT, but no, I think I want to pilot with certain entities. So maybe you might want to select those entities. And if no, are you going to work with others? Like it's sort of like something, a guideline that can help you to come up to a one conclusion. But at the end of the day, like I said, your market research objective should be able to be something like this before you can proceed to anything else. I don't know if anyone have any questions so far before you go to the next phase. We're good to go. All right, cool. So now we have what we call the research design. So now you have the hypothesis, like if now you need to understand the design. So what do you mean by research design? Research design is like a blueprint, like of like how you're going to do everything. It's like a little bit of like a roadmap. It helps you with like data collection, measurement, analysis. It kind of like answers the question of like what, where you're gonna get this, how much of you do you need, when, and the steps for your research. So there are like different types of like research design. For example, we have like explanatory design. So there's a type of design that when you want to expand, maybe you've been running a certain program in your entity, like you've been running EWA, but now you want to expand or like you want to bring new innovation. So this is a type of design that you might need to do. You see, it kind of like solve the problem, like the missing puzzles of you in terms of like expanding. And then we have the diagnosis one, which most of you guys face, because this is the one that kind of like helps you explore like the underlying reasons of the circumstances that you might meet. Why are we having low approvals? Maybe why are the people not buying my product? Like, for example, you sell to the companies as PD, why are they not buying it? So it kind of like helps you. It's a design that helps you like diagnose like everything that is kind of like happening. And then we have the other one, which is the experimental one. So this design is the one like, let's say you wanna increase, okay, let me not give you examples already, but let's just say, for example, you want to increase the prices or you want to change the prices and you want to understand how would people react to you changing the prices. And the last one is the descriptive one, which is basically like the hypothesis one, whereby maybe you're in MXP and then you can see that we're losing people. And then you're seeing like some natural observations or like you see like there's some things that are happening. And then you decide like, you know what, I need to make a research to fully understand what are the causes of this or like how can we work on this. So I have like few examples that I want you guys to tell me like which one would you categorize it under which design. For example, let's say we have create IR partners, and then these partnerships, we have good signups to apply to accepted, they're like super high. But when it comes to like converting these acceptances to approved, like the conversions are like super low. We are not able to do that. So you need to ask yourself like why. So I want you to tell me like which design do you think you need to use for you to understand like why are we having like low conversions when it comes to like accepted to approved, whereas like in the beginning we're having everything right. What do you guys think? Oh yeah, okay.
It's basically the bigger process time, we can say. Like sometimes the home LC takes time in giving a reply to the EP and to the host LC, like process time, communication gap, basically.
Exactly. That could be one of the reasons. But maybe the main question would be like, if we had to choose a design, research design, which one would you choose out of the four? What is like explanatory, diagnosis, descriptive one, and then also the experimental one? Which one would you use to solve this problem?
Can you just explain once more the diagnostics one?
Yeah, the diagnostics one is like, is a design that you kind of like do when you feel like there's a problem or like maybe your customers are facing issues or like, God, I can't believe I have to give you the answer. For example, I'm going to use this one directly, like this one, because it's the diagnosis one. There's a thing of like your, yeah, the crazy part, like, it's like when you see like there's a certain circumstances or like challenges that your customers are facing, and then you don't understand where they're coming from or like why. Because for example, you're able to find them the right slots and then they apply, they get accepted, but you don't understand like why are these people not paying to be approved to go for these opportunities. You see, so it's a matter of like you diagnose the problems or the challenges that you are facing, maybe as an entity or like even for your customer. So it's like a diagnosis. Like when you go to the hospital, you say, hey, you're sick. Why am I sick? We kind of like give you like, okay, maybe you have a headache, even though I'm not a doctor, but something like that. You just kind of like try to go through the problem. So that would be like diagnosis. So I don't know if it makes sense or like it's kind of like clear. It's kind of like different from, for example, like I said, experimental one. Because experimental one, maybe you're raising the prices and then you want to see how they react. You're not diagnosing anything. You're just trying to experiment it, you see. Or like you want to expand, which is the explanatory one. You want to expand to a bigger market. So it's kind of like different. So yeah, we have a second one here. I want to hear your opinion, guys. So let's say right now, we are able to recruit like young people in the organization, like really good talent, but they only last for like 3 months in the organization. They fail to adapt to the environment or they feel like this is not the right place for them. So what kind of diagnosis do you think we need to take? Not diagnosis. What kind of research design do we need to take here? Anyone? Or we don't know?
Maybe explanatory.
Okay, explanatory. All right, cool. What about this one also? I think this one might be a little bit obvious. You know, like for example, you, Mr. Giant, you have this You Speak Forum, which you organize each and every single year, and people come a lot at high rate. But like the problem is like, hey, we're not making any profit. And then you go like, maybe let me increase the prices, but you don't know how your customers would react. So which one are you gonna use? I'm
Experimental.
asking Jane. Exactly.
Experimental.
I was asking my UI guy to hear if like he knows what he's gonna do. And then the last one is like, let's say for example, in summer you had around like 300 GV realizations. You're done like, and all of them are done, or majority of them are done by university graduates. Like people just completed this year, and since they already have interest in our program, like they already went for GV. Now you're asking yourself, how about I introduce OGTA to this market? So which one will you use? Research design.
I really feel like the experimental one could be a good one, but I'm not sure. Like, because we need to do an experiment. How about like we need to if introduce OGTA? So it's an experiment, you know. That's why.
Exactly. It makes sense. You can actually put it in both, which is actually true. Either you can put it in like explanatory one or like the one of like experimental one. The only thing is like explanatory one is more of like, hey, we're trying to expand, like we're trying to explore the market. So that's why it's usually used like that. And then this one below here that we talked about for people not being able to keep them, it's a descriptive one because we are being able to observe this is happening naturally. Like maybe not naturally because there are like other factors that we can do, but like it's something that has been happening and then we're trying to observe it. So it's why it's like descriptive, it's like natural observation or like case studies. And then the other one up, like I already said, is like diagnosis one, and then we have the experimental one for the prices. So yeah, that's basically cool. So under like we are still in the second part, which is like the research design, right? You also need to understand the methodologies. And I don't think this is new to anyone here, especially who has tried to do market research or who have been following the episode. So for example, we have qualitative research, which is basically for you to gain understanding of underlying reasons or like the motivations of people, to uncover prevalent trends in thought and opinion. Why we say in thought and opinion is because in this type of research, you kind of like get to talk to people directly. But when you talk about like quantitative research, it's basically numerical data that you kind of like collect. And then when you make this one, it's kind of like close-ended questions. What do I mean? It's like, how old are you? For example, we are Isaac, right? We are only looking for people between 18 and 30. So you're going to give them options from 18 until 30. They don't have to put their age there. And then, for example, which level of studies are you? You're gonna put first year, second year, third, but it's kind of like closed or like multiple choice type of question. And then now, this information, this research that we get here, its job is to do what? Is to validate the qualitative research. You don't just use quantitative research, the one that you get as a big and thing that is going to give you the answers. No, it actually validates what you have had through like the qualitative research. So one thing is like, after now you have decided the methodology that you're going to use, qualitative research, and then you're going to use quantitative research. You need to create questions, like question setting, whereby you kind of like create, what kind of questions am I going to ask? Isn't it that the first thing that you did was what? You designed the problem that you have. This is the type of a problem that you have, right? And then you chose a methodology that you're going to use. So now, once you have this methodology, you need to explore like, what questions can I ask to get the answers that will give me that will give me a solution to whatever the problem that I have. So this is what we call the question setting. And then for qualitative research, you need to understand that here we need a researcher as an interviewer, like someone to communicate. So you need questions that people can communicate. And then basically it's about to investigate and understand why. And normal circumstances, it's kind of like the cheaper one, and it gives you suggestions. While the other one, the researcher is not an interviewer. Like there we try to kind of like confirm and justify and validate how many and how much. It's normally the most expensive one and it takes longer and it kind of like gives you recommendations. So one thing is like, you need to understand when you're setting up the questions, you have to have them in 3 different languages. I mean, in many different languages. If you're going to make market research, for example, for you cannot just use one language of English. You need to make sure it approaches all your market. For example, when I was in Algeria, they speak Arabic, they speak French, they speak English. We had to do 3 of them, of which it was still not enough because we have a section of people who speak a language called Kabyle. But you need to make sure like they're all in languages that people can understand or feel comfortable about. And then in case you want to learn more about like question design, you can refer to episode 2, which was done by our amazing Haitham. And I'll already put the link here so that you can go through it immediately after here. So yeah, it can give you more insights. But for example, I have prepared some few questions or like sort of like a template for you to be able to see how you can like do qualitative research, what kind of questions. But this is like for GT, for example, like I used it like you ask them like personal questions, general questions, and then you kind of like ask them GTA questions. Likewise, now you can change it and then ask them, for example, EWA questions for here. So this is like where you can like communicate with them directly. And I've also prepared, this is a form. I mean, this is sort of like a form that you're supposed to prepare that you're gonna set. You can check everything here on the same tool. Because you need to make sure like, where are they? Yeah, I only prepare them in like English language. So there's a tool that you can use as sort of like a template for you to be able to see like the flow of like what we're talking about or the type of questions. So when it comes to quantitative research, you need to prepare like all the questions down. You need to write them down. And then after you write them down, you're supposed to create them into a template. So you're supposed to make sure like it's very clear, it's very descriptive. I can make an example. It's very important for you to be careful when you're selecting the type of questions or like how you communicate these questions. Let's say, for example, you're interviewing someone and then you go like to them, what made you go with our amazing GTA like program? Like maybe they've went for GTA, and then instead of you trying to understand how do they think, what do they think about our program, you're already adding words like amazing, which usually means that you're already giving them an impression or like you're really changing their mind in terms of like thinking that your program is amazing. So it's something that you should be careful about. And then now after you have designed, for example, like the questions that you're needed, like I said, there's already a link there. You can go to the third part of it, which I'm going to need a lot of you guys, like a little bit of contribution from this one, which is the sampling, or like you can tell me what you think about it. Sampling, because you have solved the problem or you have defined the problem, and then now you have like the research design that you want to use. You already have the questions that you already said that you're going to be asking people. But now it's very, very, very important for you to understand from whom are you going to get this. For example, if you're a BD, maybe you have asked yourself, if I get a chance to talk to these companies one-to-one, what kind of questions do I need to ask them? And then for you to get the answers. But now you have set all those questions, right? Like you already said them. But now it's about like you understanding from whom am I going to get this this information. So when it comes to like, for example, qualitative research, you need to understand like it requires like a very small number of respondents. Like you don't need a lot of people for you to get like this type of data, and it happens through like discussion. Whereas when it comes to like qualitative one, it kind of like requires a lot of like responses. It kind of like represent like a larger scale, like a large sample of size. So these are some of the things that you need to understand. Now, let's say you run like, for example, your market research nationally at the national level, right? So what are you supposed to do when it comes to sampling? You need to define the market that you want to do. For example, you need to understand whether it's like, I'm going to explore the market of students, people who are done studying, ISA cars, companies, startups. Like you need to be able to understand who are you going to explore in the first place. And then you also need to understand like the statistics. Like for example, averagely, let's say in my country right now, I'm coming from a country where we're like around like 2 million people entirely. So we don't even have like a lot of graduates. I'm gonna make an example. This is not an estimate, but let's say like we currently have 100K graduates between 18 and 30. But this is something that you're supposed to also be aware of. If you're saying I'm going to explore the market of students, averagely, how many university students do you think you have in your country if you are doing this at the national level? So you need to first of all understand that if you are attacking, you're going through like ISACAS, You need to understand, like, maybe you are someone from MXP. How many members do we have in ISAC? Maybe you have around like 400. So that's the first thing that you're supposed to understand. And then you also need to understand, like, how many responses do you need to validate your theory or the theory that you have from this number of people? And then you need to make sure you kind of like break it down. Qualitative responses, how many do I need? Quantitative, how many do I need? And also, if I'm running it in the national level, how much does each LC have to contribute in terms of like the distribution? Let's say 200 people, you have 5 LCs. Do you want to split it into like 40-40? I need 40 from this people, I need 40-40. You kind of like need to decide on this when you're setting up the sample. Same thing that happens with like the LCs. They still, if they're going to be running market research on their own, and then you're kind of like coordinating with them or you're helping them, they still need to define their market. Who are they trying to target? They need to understand, like, for example, the statistics of their market. How many people do they have in that market? If it's an LC that is open through an university, how many people do they have in the university? If it's based on like cities, how many people do they have in the city that is their market? And then you also need to make sure you validate your answers, like understand how many responses do you have. And then lastly, you also need to understand like the duration or the period. So how do you know the number of people that you need? So there's, I don't know how many of you know of this. It's called the sample. It's a Survey Monkey. Yeah, it's called Survey Monkey. So this kind of like helps you understand how much market you're supposed to have. For example, here, let's say you think you have a market of, let's say 100 people, 100,000 people, right? And then how confident are you in terms of like you getting the right answers from them? Let's say it's actually like you put it at like 90%. And then you also put like the margin of error. Let's say like something that you can say is the margin of error. And then you put 5. It's supposed to give you an answer. I don't know, my internet might be shitty today. Did I put, yeah. For example, if you have like 100,000 people and then you're like confidence level, you have like 90% in these people, margin of error. So this is the number of people that you should make sure like you have for quantitative, like the responses that you have for quantitative, the people that you will send them the forms. So it applies, for example, even in the LCs. Let's say you have 400 members, you trust that at least 95% of them, you'll be confident in what they say. 10, maybe margin of error. It can like give you the sample of like how many people do I need for me to complete this. But first of all, you need to know the statistics of them. So yeah. I don't know. Does anyone have any questions so far? No questions. Okay.
No.
Let me see. And same thing. I've also tried to create a template here. I don't know if you can, yeah. I also tried to create a template on the same tool that I was using. For example, if you're going to run it nationally, the first thing, like I said, you need to define the market that you want to do. You need to understand the average population of that market that you're trying to attack. Let's say you're going to run anywhere in the capital. Like how many people do we have in the capital age between this and this? Or like how many companies, let's say you want to run BD. How many companies, how many startups do we have in this city that we're trying to explore, or like at the national level? And then after that, you try to understand like how many can I have like interviews with them or like one-to-ones with them, but how many can I try to influence them to fill up maybe my quantitative responses? If you're going to run it per LC, each LC have to define their market. They can be different markets. They need to define also the average population of that market that they have. So it's much or less like the similar thing. So yeah, that's basically it. And then now we go to the most important part of it, which is like, you have collected every single thing, right? Now we need to collect data. You have created every single thing. Now we need to collect data, right? So basically here's like data collection. You need to make sure like whatever that you had planned, you actually achieve it. Whatever the numbers that you have planned to have in terms of like the responses, you actually achieve it. So what we have done so far is like we define our market objective. You already know what it is. You already chose like your design, research design. You chose your methodology. You created the questions that you think like are important for you to ask those people. And then you understand the sample that we need. And then you created your form or like the materials that you can use, whether for the interviews or the ones that you can use for as like the surveys that you can send. So it easily means like, yo, we come like the long way. So the next step is like, how do we get this information we are searching for, which I feel like is the most important thing, because we can do every preparation, but like, how the hell are we going to get this information from these people outside? If we are trying to approach people outside, what is like companies, what is like you, how are we going to get it? So let's start with like for qualitative research. The first thing that you need to remember, like, qualitative research is like small number of respondents, so you don't need a lot of it. And then how can you do it? Like I already mentioned, you can either call people and then have a group call with them, or you can have one-to-ones with them, or like you can have an interview with them. And then this, you can also even use surveys, but when you use surveys, they're not like the one for qualitative, they're kind of like open, like how was your experience? You see, it's an open question. They can write, they can elaborate. It's different from when you ask someone a question of like your age, how old are you, stuff like that. So the audience, what I usually advise people is like preferably should be like majority of the people should be the people that have used your product before. When you're like, when it comes to qualitative, the people that you can talk about to, because they have an idea what it can be an ISACA for someone who is an MXP guy, what it can be EPs for someone who's trying to explore maybe GTA something, or it can be EWA participants, the previous ones. These are the people that you should invite for this ones. Or it can be like the former partners, the national partners that you used to have if you're talking about like for BD. And then one of the things that I try to tell people is like, do not just communicate with advocates, like people who say good things about your product. If when you are checking the NPS, you realize like people give like a horrible NPS, also make sure you take that point. And then if you're running it at the national level, each LC should be allocated the number of participants that they need to recruit or to bring. And then you need to make sure you kind of like, you can organize it by having a one national day where you conduct all the activities, for example, using the same tool. Whether you can do it like on this day, we're going to come and bring all our participants together, maybe in the MC house, depending on like how big your entity and how far is it. And then you come and bring these people, you go interview them, you have a group call with them. But every single LC should be able to contribute, and then you use the same tool and centralize your information. And this can also happen like virtually or like both physically. Like you can have one-to-ones, you can have group calls as long as you organize people virtually or like even physically. And you need to bear in mind, one of the things is like, this can be costly also. So you might need to support, for example, the participants if needed. You can promise them like lunch, okay, cool, we're gonna cover your transport for you to come. So you're gonna understand like market research, it requires you to pay. And lastly, do not exceed when you're doing qualitative 20 people, like 20 participants, especially when you're running it like at the national level. Like when it's combined, maximum that I would recommend is like 15, which is still a lot. You need to have a very limited number of people that you can trust. So the only difference between what you do at the national level and what an LC can do on their own is basically like me recommending that they do it physically instead of like virtually trying to bring people along. And then also them not exceeding like 10 people. Now, the tougher one, or that I would like to think is tough, is the one for quantitative, because it requires more time and effort consuming. Yes, you have created this tool, but the question that I have for you guys is like, yes, you have created the tool, and then you've been spreading it around, like, but why should we fill it? Let me say I'm like an outsider, I'm not even an ISACA. Like, why should I fill your form? Like, do I look like someone who just feels like forms that I come across online? So what would make me want to fill this form? That's a question that I would like to hear inputs from other people. What would make you want to fill the form that you made online that someone says, hey, fill it? Camila, do you have any idea?
Maybe something that I will be interested in because I want to do something similar, or because a friend suggested me to do it.
Okay, that's a pretty good answer also. What about other people? What do you guys think? Let's say you didn't have a friend who told you, you just saw it maybe online, and then like, why should people, or think of you like, you're the owner of this form, like, but why do you think people should fill it in the first place? Why should someone randomly? Because we need to like get to the bigger market, right? Means that we need people that have never heard of us. Now, these people have no idea. Why should they do it? But anyway, we'll probably try to find answers as we go along, right? But like I said, everything will always be like in two-sided. Whether you're going to be running it as an LC or like you're going to be running it as like nationally. So like I said, this requires a huge number, right? Number of respondents. So it's kind of like more statistic. And then you need to create the national form if you're running it at the national level. It means you're going to create one form and then you're going to give it to your LCs, but they're going to be using one form. So how can we get to the market, or how can you collect data? The common ways that we have always been talking about is like the entities pages. You can use like the ISEC in Algeria's page, because I'm from Algeria, or you can use your IG if you have the market. Wow, I repeated IG. I must love IG. If I repeated it twice here, or you can use, for example, like the entity groups, the groups that you guys will have, and then you ask your members to be distributing it, right? Or you can use even your EPs groups like to kind of like get this data. So it's the same thing even for the LCs. You can also support them using the entities pages. Now the question that I also have for you is like, forms and survey are sometimes boring, right? Like that's a fact. They're like super boring. So what are other means that we can gather information? Like what other platforms can we use aside from like just forms? How can we gather information? What do you guys think aside from like the surveys and the forms? Anyone? Nothing? All right, cool. I have few ideas. They're not like a lot, like just small ideas. Let me see. Okay, interview, yeah. For example, some of the things that we kind of like neglect. Okay, go ahead and share.
Yeah, I guess like you previously mentioned, O2Os can be one of the things, But if
Yeah.
it is in like quantitative, then it's not a good idea.
That's what I'm trying to say, like in quality, because we already talked about qualitative, we are done with it. Now we want to understand how can we collect like quantitative information like data without having to always use forms. Okay, cool. I'll just share some small ideas, but I still have more questions for you guys. So you should be ready. So one of the things that we haven't capitalized on a lot is like using the methods of like pools, like creating your pool in a crop. Because your pool is going to give you statistics in there. Like when you create, for example, like how many people, let's say you're in like in an ISA crop, you go like how many people have went for an exchange? And then all of them can go like, yes, I went, or no, I can went. It's a small pool that you can actually use, but it can give you a lot of information. Like you can create a lot of like, not a lot, but like a certain number of like pools in certain different type of crops, you see. That's one thing you can do. Also, you can also gather information like from DAL, especially for people like in operation, from Sona, especially for people like in the back office, or like even from like an expert. It's something, still some places that you can actually gather information from. So another thing is like, the question that we've been asking ourselves that we need to probably try to find is like, how can we reach more people, like the people that are not in our market? Forget about the people, the EPs probably already have EP groups, or like you already have the ISEC network. But now I want to reach people that we have never had before, especially let's say for EU. Like how can we do that? So we're going to have to check some few ways that I thought about that we can do that. But one thing that I need to remind you guys, I don't know from which entities you're from. If you want to conduct market research, you need to understand it kind of like needs investment, especially quantitative one. It might need you to spend a little bit, not a lot of cash though. So one of the things that you can do is you can approach like some group admins. Like let's say like they are like group admins like that have the market that we have. For example, I remember when I was in Algeria, I'm going to talk about my Algerian when I was in MCVP a lot, like as a sample. We used to have a lot of student groups from all the universities, and they were like admins in there. If we can approach these admins and then you share the survey with them for them to share it within the group, they will definitely share it, and then you can get more responses, which is something that you can capitalize on. Everywhere you feel like there's a group that has the market that I'm looking for, then try to approach the group admin, and then he can give you access, or like he can post your survey, and then people can fill it. And then you can also approach, for example, your national social network influencers. You see that you might feel like they have your market. The reason why I'm mentioning this, it has happened before also. When I was in Algeria, there's this guy who makes these YouTube videos that he makes them in Arabic. He is so funny. Like I still have one of his videos. I don't even understand Arabic, but like the gestures and everything that he does is so funny. And he has a lot of like young people's market there that I can guarantee you is like less than 30, but they're like university students. And then I do remember at some point we approached him, which is something that you can do. You can approach, for example, like some influencers that you feel like this person have my market, and then they can post either even a poll for you to get the information you want, or they can post even like the survey that you have. And on top of that, you can use things like search engine optimization, such as is it like SEMrush? I've used this before, whereby I'm trying to understand like what do people say about ISAC, for example. You can put the word ISAC and it can kind of like give you ideas of what people think there. It already give you information. Or another thing that you can actually do is like you pay for ads. Like you just pay ads for your national survey. So it's the same thing that you can also use even when an LC is working on its own. They can approach the group admins, especially in the universities or like in their cities, depending on where the market is. And they can find some local influencers, people that can kind of like influence other people to do something. So because like right now, if I don't know, I like, for example, J. Cole. I listen to J. Cole. If J. Cole asks me, like he's a rapper, by the way, I don't know if you know him. If that dude asks me like right now, like to fill a certain survey for some company that I don't even know, that I don't even like, I'll definitely fill it. So it's just a matter of like, we have seen these people promoting on YouTube. So like I said, also you can refer to like the search engines. Let me check how much time I still have. And then also you can pay for your ads. Yeah, right. So like I said, you gotta spend. So you're not gonna go to this guy and then he's like an influencer and tell him like, right, just put my survey there. Like, what do I get? And at the same time, like I said, you gotta invest. I didn't mean like you gotta give them like money, but like some small offers that you can kind of like have. We can have an understanding with the influencer, like, look, can you get me a certain number of people? So he can ask you like, how can I know if I got you that number of people? You can include in your form, like, how did you get to know about this form, for example? What you can do depending on like how important your market research is and how you want to expand, and then like a certain influencer can give you, you can probably promise him like, okay, we're going to give you a GV exchange free of charge. And then all you need is like, give us 800 responses from your market that you have, right? And then that's it. Or probably you give them a ticket, especially for Giant, he's going to have EWA event, right? You're planning to do that. You can tell him like, okay, give me this number of responses from the small groups that you have, and then I'll give you a ticket to You Speak Forum or like my local initiatives or even our conferences. But like, definitely they can come or what? He's a group admin, come on. He doesn't need much. Just give this guy a hoodie or like a t-shirt. You just promise like, we're gonna give you an ISAC t-shirt. Like, I'm just trying to say like, we don't have to think of how we can get help from this outside people using like money, but there are like a lot of things that we can offer them and they can help me, that they can help you. And the question that I also have, like, is that honestly all we can do to get to your market? Not really. The last thing is like, people might not hate it or you don't exploit a lot in ISAC, but I think it actually works, especially for companies, especially for BD. Trust me, for BD, you need to exploit your competitors. If you are sure that in your entity, you have competitors, you need to explore them. What do I mean? You need to go to your competitors' page, whatever, the forum that they have, and just read the comments, like understand how people react to that. And then take notes. Like, you need to literally take, like, you need to, I don't know if you don't have competitors, maybe it might be set, but you need to go to someone that might be doing the same thing about the businesses, how do they respond to them and all that. And I'm telling you, it's another way that you can explore your market, because you're just going to try to understand what are these people saying. And then you kind of like come and use that information to create something that is kind of like different from what they do. We've talked a lot about like data connection, and then we have around like 10 minutes. Let me go. But let's say, voila, here we have collected our data. This is the data. This is one of the data that I used previously, like a research. The only thing that I hid is like the name so that you don't get to see these people's information. But like, this is like the data that you can get at the end of the day from the survey that you have. As you can see, it's like, in what year of studies are you in? Some are saying in the 4th year, 2nd year, phase, bachelor's, I'm doing master's. But like, at the end of the day, you've already created a form, you have distributed it, you have used influencers, you have used all the people that you could use. So at the end of the day, you have your data collected. Oh God, isn't it about damn time? So we are finally here. We actually have our information. We have done the interviews. Everything is like collected. So now what are we supposed to be doing next? So you're supposed to make sure you analyze your data. So I didn't put a lot of graphics here, but at the end of the day, you can go to the tool that I used just for you to see how I was trying to do it. It's very simple. I think that each and every single one should be aware of this. Let me, God, let me hide myself. Yeah, for example, this is like the responses that you did. So like I said, the only difference is like for me, I was trying to do this as a GT, like using it more as an example, but it's something that is applicable to almost everyone else. But for example, through this data, I can kind of like create graphs to fully understand like how many people, let me see. Okay, for example, let me try to use this one for, what is it called? Which continent, you see? And then I just try to create, not filter, God damn it. You see, for example, you can use, you don't have to use like circles or like the pies all the time, but it can kind of like show you like this is how you can present, like for example, you can do your analysis, like for example, try to understand, okay, how many people are coming from which region. You find that most of the people apply, say, oh, I'm from Middle East, and then followed by like Europe, and then followed by what, Americas and AP. This was just like a sample. I was delivering the same, not the same, but like a similar session. So I asked people to just put any crazy type of information. But like at the end of the day, you're supposed to create, for example, like you're supposed to create an output. So it's supposed to be something that is representable. You don't just come and bring all this information. What is like the field of studies, you need to understand which year are they in. So this is why we kind of like have to prepare it in more of like a graphical way that can be presentable to people. And then you also need to understand like you need to put the right titles. For example, majority of the people that we have or that filled up the form were like between 22 and 23. Which studies were they in? Most of them were like in the first year, and then followed by like people who were in their final year, which means that if we want to explore, we can say, oh, okay, cool. These guys were in first year, we can send them for GV. These guys were in their final year because they're like our second market. These are the people that we can send for GTA because they're already done. So these are like some of the opportunities that you can get at the end of the day. Okay, so we have these people, but like, what did they study the most? And then you realize that majority of them did marketing, and then they're followed by what? By teaching. So this is how you kind of like consolidate, you analyze your information to create an output. So once you have done the analysis, what you have to do is like, don't forget, you're supposed to compare the data that you got from quantitative research, like that one that you just did. You're going to compare it to the one of qualitative one, just to see if it validates it. Like, do they make sense? Like, does it validate what the opinion of this other people said or not? If not, then you have to find a way out. Like, and then you're supposed to prepare a report in preparation, and then you do the presentation. And then you also need to identify what answers you get from this research in comparison to your hypothesis. Like when you're in the beginning wanting to do this research, you need to understand like how much does it validate what I was doing? How are they like, in connection? Like how do they click? Like do they make sense? Is what I was thinking like the right thing, like what the market actually thinks? If not, you can also like identify what other opportunities you can explore based on the research that you had. Maybe you're doing it like trying to explore like maybe the startups, the new startups, and then you realize like majority of the startups, they're interested in like working. Maybe you wanted to sell them, like, hey, since you have a startup, I can bring people from abroad to come and help boost your startup. Or else they're not interested in that. But what are they interested in collaborating with your entity in terms of like creating awareness by joining your EWA. So it means that you can change from selling them, bring like internship opportunities or like internship portfolio, but rather like sell them EWA related stuff, because those are the opportunities that you realize after you do your market research. And then all these things you're coordinating with them in every single phase from the beginning, except probably when you're making the research objective, because that's where you're going to select who does it impact. Can I work with all SCs or can I work with just selected ones? But from that moment, whether it's like creating the tools, either you're going to create a tool that you say, this is a national form that you're going to be sharing. If you're going to be helping entity LCs do research on their own, but while it's being maintained as a project from the national level, which is an MCVP, you need to make sure you give them a template of like, this is how your form can look like. All you have to do is like customize it and then you share it. But the timeline is supposed to be the same. When you share, for example, like the template, I mean, when you share the forms, it should be during the same period. When you close them, when you have the interviews for qualitative information, when you do the analysis, it should always be the same. We're left with like a couple of minutes. So yeah. I don't know if anyone else still have any questions, or that's basically it, because that's all that I had prepared from my side. I do have some resources that I'll add here that I actually use, for example, for the sample, the types of designs, like, and I'll also share like the link that I was using, especially for people that are more operational. I feel like it can be helpful to you to kind of like have a flow. But yeah, does anyone else have any questions, or we're good to go? We are right on time.
Yes, I have one question, Victor. It's regarding like suppose we want to do sampling for an EVA event, and we need first like for that we need a quantitative, okay, but a quantitative one, but investment is a problem, you know. So is there any other mean we can go through for this?
In terms of like, since I talked about like the influence, I don't know. When I was thinking, for example, I still feel like you can sell the event that you even want to do to these people. You tell this person, like, as an example, like, look, I'm gonna have an event, but I need to make sure like I actually provide like the right things to these people, or like the right content that they need. So I need you to help me spread this event. I mean, spread this form just for me to get that information. When I host this event, you will get a free ticket, unlike people who will be paying for it. And I feel like it's an offer that you can really provide to him, because when he comes, he's going to come for free for him. It's not going to cost you anything. Isaac will be there. They're not going to be paying anything. So I feel like there are like ways that we can twist around getting support. But at the same time, like you doing it without you any type of investment, it's a problem. Unless you actually have a long time that you know, like through your members, through like friend of friend, you can explore. But that is going to take you a long time for you to actually get to achieve your goal. But I feel like those are like the options. I feel like you just gotta explore the type of support that you can get without you having to actually spend money, but still getting the results. I don't know. Does anyone else have any question that can, answer to his question? We're not allowed. If you have an answer that can.
I guess like during the time when I was thinking about it, I felt one more thing, like the partnerships which we have with colleges and universities that might help us out in this doing this, you know.
Exactly. That's a brilliant idea. I should put it already in my PPT. No, I should add it there. That's an amazing thought. That's an amazing thought. And yeah, I actually think it's actually a brilliant one. They can help you depending on what you provide them in return. And thanks for the sharing.
Thank you, Victor. Thank you.